Well, I do not hold to that. Those filmmakers deserve to be celebrated. Oh my god. This isn't the year to skip a top 10 list. This is the first year where it might actually matter, and for everything else, there's mutual aid. Got my second wind. Next video is gonna be top 10 favorite films of 2020. That was unearned. So by the end of 2020, amidst the dearth of theatrical releases throughout year one of the COVID-19 pandemic, I thought I'd found a silver lining. The fact that all the movies went straight to streaming that year meant that I was free to watch whatever I wanted, absent any misdirection from some big budget studio ad campaign. But then year one of the pandemic became year two, and I wound up watching even fewer films in 2021 than I did in 2020. Streaming sites are just so uninspiring. There's no way to tell from just a thumbnail and a log line which films were originally meant for theaters, and which were always destined for video on demand. And after so many evenings watching completely forgettable 2-star bores, it eventually became easier for me to just fall back on my old favorites instead of taking consistent chances on any new films. And if something really was that good, surely it would filter through the cultural background radiation of the internet without me trying to suss it out for myself, right? Well, that wound up being a recipe for me watching just 14 new films in 2021, barely one per month instead of my usual 40 or 50, half of which I didn't even like. Plus, there's still a clear bias for big budget Hollywood tentpoles, despite all my highfalutin talk last year about being able to watch whatever I wanted now that streaming was the only option. I guess you could say that 2021 kicked my ass, in more ways than one. That's why I didn't do a top 10 video at the end of last year. Not only had I barely even seen 10 films, I was just too demoralized. Nothing had gotten better since the year before. COVID was still raging. In fact, the death rate actually peaked in 2021. Income inequality was getting worse and worse, and the housing market still sucks. I'll never own. The economy's been so bad for so long that even after the next crash, it's not like I'm gonna have enough savings standing by to take advantage of anyone else's misfortune. No, what's gonna happen is the same thing that happens when every market crashes. The biggest pre-existing moneylenders and hedge funds will continue to further consolidate capital. So after the next crash, a lot of people who own one home will own none, and a lot of people who own 10 homes will own 20. And on the movie front, not a lot of good news there either. Studios didn't seem to be taking any chances on original mid-budget films, and even with the vaccine generating some temporary lulls in COVID cases, most everything was still getting dumped to streaming, with nary a word on social media, which only made it harder to find anything good. And I just didn't see the cause for optimism anymore. We're a long way from 2014, back when I entered a spec script into the Nickel Screenwriting Fellowship and made it to the top 15%. Life was exciting for a whole week after that. We are now 3/4 of the way through 2022, and my optimism still isn't back yet. Everywhere I look, I see portents of doom, but I still want to get the lay of the land, even if it paints a bleak picture. Where is Hollywood headed? For once, I'd like to not be blindsided by the next industry sea change. I'm no expert, just a concerned citizen, but so long as we're in a spitballing mood, and we're too tired to do anything else, might as well spitball. Number 1. IP is already more important than ideas. Hollywood has been obsessed with adapting pre-existing intellectual properties since the dawn of the industry. Gone with the Wind was based on a book. Sound of Music was originally a stage play. And even Star Wars was a loose remake of The Hidden Fortress, with heavy callbacks to the Buck Rogers serials of the 1920s and 30s. So it's not like this is a new phenomenon. The fact that almost every one of the highest-grossing films of recent years is based on some pre-sold property isn't shocking, or even especially worrisome to me. But you didn't used to have to worry about Hollywood messing up a story simply by virtue of the fact that it's adapted, whereas now, I feel like you do. This is how far I made it into my first screening of Spider-Man No Way Home. About 10 minutes. Peter has just been outed as Spider-Man and is forced to go into hiding, which puts enormous pressure on him and MJ's relationship. But then MJ asks him a really interesting question.
Does any part of you feel relieved about all of this?
And then Peter gives a really interesting answer.
Ever since I got bit by that spider, I've only had 1 week where my life has felt normal. Or kind of normal, I guess. And that was when you found out. because then everyone that was in my life that I wanted to know knew.
But before these emotions have any chance to play out...
Wrap it up.
You both like each other, we get it, hang up. There's no new ground being broken, okay? I need my 8 hours.
Because God forbid a Marvel movie have more than 10 seconds of emotional sincerity in it. The problem here is that this scene is trying to appeal to two conflicting audiences at the same time. The one that actually likes to feel things when they watch films, and the one that likes to have their nostalgia appeased by the further expansion and canonization of lore. That's what this is. The movie chastising itself for valuing emotion over IP for 3 minutes. I know this might sound super nitpicky and harsh, and maybe the movie gets better later on, but on this particular day, I just wasn't in the mood to see a film that was going to tell me I was stupid or silly for wanting to feel something, even for a minute. And the reason No Way Home feels compelled to try and appease multiple opposing audiences like this is the fact that it's an adaptation of a super expensive IP. See, IPs come with built-in audiences. That is, in fact, the whole appeal of adapting them, from a financial standpoint. But then studios want to try and spoon-feed those built-in audiences exactly what they expect, lest they risk alienating them in their valuable attention, which is just the instant death of art. You can't cameo your way to catharsis.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
The filmmakers usually try and do the best they can with the mandates that they've been given, but what you inevitably get is a film with the artistic intent split down the middle. And you know what? It worked. From a financial standpoint anyway. No Way Home grossed nearly $2 billion worldwide. But what actually succeeded here? Was it the film or a marketing strategy? And I know I'm not the only one who's tired of all these middle-of-the-road adaptations of pre-existing properties. Just this summer, we got Doctor Strange 2, Jurassic World 3, Thor 4, Top Gun Maverick, Ms. Marvel, Obi-Wan, Lightyear, She-Hulk, Pinocchio, Andor, a Game of Thrones spinoff, and a $10 bajillion Lord of the Rings prequel. And the general mood has been, maybe 1 or 2 will be good. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I have never seen franchise fatigue this bad. And I think it's because of the way that studios focus test the artistic intent of their IPs like this.
If you missed it, don't worry, they'll say the line again and again and again.
Lately I've been haunted by the idea that I'd have made more films by now if I'd never started a YouTube channel. I read that Quentin Tarantino said he never would have made films if podcasting were a thing when he was younger, and I can't help but wonder if YouTube isn't having the same effect on me. Have I only made 1 film so far because I'm spending all my free time making YouTube videos instead? It's certainly possible. I had to stop making YouTube videos for a whole year while I finished up Second Service, and I haven't written anything since. Nothing that came close to actual production anyway. So what's the lesson? Am I gonna have to give up my YouTube channel if I'm ever gonna make films ever again? Number 2. The race to produce the best content has become the race to produce the most content. I don't have any hard data on this, but it seems to me like there's a big proliferation of limited series lately, and I don't think it has anything to do with how much time it actually takes to tell these stories. My cynical armchair analyst take is that all the streaming sites are simply trying to produce more content than anyone else. Keep all eyes on the screen for as long as possible. Now, to be clear, the mere existence of so many limited series doesn't bother me. In fact, I've watched plenty in recent years that I really liked, but I'm worried that what would normally be some pretty decent or even some pretty good films are either getting rejected at the pitch or unnaturally Frankensteined into these bloated miniseries, all for the sake of keeping as many eyeballs on the screen as possible until the next big thing drops. That's the new goal. Don't let anyone look away, to the point where studios seem to be stalling for time rather than curating good content. Obi-Wan Kenobi was the real tipping point for me. I have never seen a series scream, I was only supposed to be a 2-hour movie harder than this. Now, we happen to know for a fact that Obi-Wan was originally conceived as a feature film, but the switch from movie to miniseries doesn't seem to have been made for artistic reasons. The pacing has been so neatly obliterated by the purposeless reformatting that it actually made me wonder if the switch from film to series didn't come until after they'd already shot the damn thing, like they just tripled the duration of each shot in order to pad the length. At one point, I was even tempted to download all the episodes and then cut them together into a superior 2-hour fan edit, but then I remembered I'm gonna die one day and I decided against it. And it's not just that, Disney put out a bad series. I mean, that happens all the time. It may be disappointing, sure, but it wouldn't actually concern me if I didn't think that they'd rather put out 6 hours of crap that they know people will watch simply because of the branding, instead of 2 hours of good content if they can't string people along for 6 weeks. It's not just a bad trend, it's baked into the business model. It goes back to the over-reliance on IP. If they think they can get people to tune in simply because of the branding, they're not going to worry so much about making it good. I'm not saying the artists involved are actively trying to make it bad, of course not. But what happens is, deadlines get tighter, and they don't have enough time to develop something that really sings. Why do you think they're not releasing any of these series onto home video? It's not because they're already streaming, not with these piss-poor compression rates. It's because they're not concerned about rewatchability. That's also why they market these things almost exclusively by teasing cameos and treating spoilers like they're punishable by death, because they figure nobody's gonna watch these things more than once. I've been battling the worst burnout of my life for the last 14 months. Hopefully you didn't notice, since I've still managed to upload at least one video every 2 to 3 months, but I've lost weeks to blank Word documents over the past year. It got so bad that after my last video I decided it was going to take 2 months off just to try and figure out what the next video was going to be, or if there was even going to be a next video. And even though I quickly came up with more ideas than I knew what to do with, I just couldn't bring myself to start writing any of them. I kept wondering, how do I even decide which topics are worth exploring in the first place? Would the existence of any of these videos actually matter after I die? Which freaked me out, not because I have an acute fear of death or anything, or at least my fear of death expresses itself in other ways, thank you very much. No, I think it freaked me out because I'm not supposed to be worried about legacy just yet. I'm supposed to be doing this because it's fun, not because of how I want to be remembered after I die. But so long as I'm asking the question, I never wanted to be remembered for making videos about movies. I want to be remembered for making movies. And again, I'm left wondering if YouTube is the right call anymore. Number 3, streaming rights will become more labyrinthian, asinine, predatory. So here's a cursed sentence I found on Wikipedia. Jurassic World Dominion is scheduled to stream on Universal's Peacock website within 4 months of its theatrical release. The film would then move to Amazon Prime Video for 10 months, before returning to Peacock for the final 4 months. Following that 18-month deal, it will air on the Starz platform as part of Universal's post-Pay 1 licensing agreement with the network.
What?
So because of sentences like that, I recently broke down and paid $19 for a year's worth of Letterboxd Premium, which tells me which movies are available to stream on which platforms. But that only solves half the problem of information. The much bigger issue with streaming rights, which cinephiles and home video enthusiasts have been harping about for years, is the fact that streaming rights are subject to some shockingly ephemeral terms and conditions. Basically, anything can be removed at any time.
I don't know.
What happened?
Where's the rest of it?
That includes exclusive titles that have never been released on home video, and even digital copies of films that you already paid real, actual live money for. The big news from the last few weeks was that HBO Max was quietly removing various titles from its streaming library, either to avoid paying residuals or for the tax write-offs. But the point worth stressing here is that studios are incentivized to pull them whether they're underperforming or overperforming. And this isn't just bad for viewers, it's really bad for industry professionals. Know why Chris Nolan fought so hard to keep Tenet in theaters back in 2020? I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I knew what was in his heart of hearts. Like the fact that he gets 20% of the first dollar gross certainly might have had something to do with it. But you wanna know what his stated reasoning was? It didn't get a lot of press. He said it's because residuals for below-the-line talent aren't worked out for streaming sites just yet. So the only way to make sure that all the costume designers, set decorators, and background characters are properly compensated is by keeping it in theaters for as long as possible.
I'm talking about when I come onto set and I've got to shoot a scene with, a waiter or a lawyer who has 2 or 3 lines. They need to be earning a living in that profession, working maybe sometimes a couple of days a year. And that's why the residual structure is in place. That's why the unions have secured participations for people down the line. These are important principles that when a company starts devaluing the individual assets by using them as leverage for a different business strategy without first figuring out how those new structures are going to have to work, it's a sign of great danger for the ordinary people who work in this industry.
Personally, as big a union town as Hollywood already is, I can only hope that they gain more and more negotiating power as time goes on. Labor rights are ultimately the only thing that's going to make the situation any better. Man, I miss theaters. But then, I don't want to go see anything right now. Every new movie looks terrible to me. Oh god. Am I one of those people who just fixates on one style of filmmaking that was popular in their formative years and then spends the rest of their life whining about how they just don't make movies like they used to? I hope not. I hope Jurassic World Dominion was really just that bad. I mean, I know how this works. Current years only seem like crap compared to previous years because we only remember the good films from previous years anyway. And yet, I'm not liking anything I'm seeing anymore. I've seen 15 films so far this year, which is already better than last year, but I only really liked one of them. Another 3 were pleasant surprises, but everything else was either the sort of film I thought was fine, but I'll probably never watch it again, or actually pretty bad. Everyone else seemed to love The Batman, Prey, The Northman, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Why didn't I? Is the whole industry really getting worse and worse? And I'm just the only one who noticed? Or am I just losing out on the joy I used to feel when I watch new movies? I hate to think what Occam's razor would suggest. Is this what it feels like to slide from high-functioning depression to low-functioning depression? Number 4. We are rapidly approaching the point of just one studio. So Disney Plus was the first streaming site to reach the point where they basically had something new coming out at all times. Between Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, 20th Century Fox, National Geographic, and the Disney legacy media, you basically never have to go more than a month before the next big thing drops. And that's just Disney. We're not even counting all the other studios that release big budget legacy media every other month. And while capitalist apologists might try and sell this as a benefit to the consumer, after all, who doesn't love new stuff coming out all the time? I don't think it is. They're not generating all this new content by hiring more talent and paying increasingly competitive wages. They're doing it through media acquisitions. Not to mention good old-fashioned labor exploitation. They're not content creators so much as content landlords, snatching up the rights to as many projects as possible and then just recycling them into repackaged nostalgia fodder. And I'm arguing it's by no means a neutral practice. Every time one of these big studios acquires the rights to a bunch of new properties, projects that were already in development usually either get mothballed entirely or hastily repurposed into some bastardized version of themselves that better fits some bullshit brand image. And maybe you're sitting there like,
Who cares?
it ain't called show business for nothing. Oh, believe me, I have not once been able to forget the fact that film and television is indeed a business. The thing is though, you and I are the ones who are paying to protect these precious brand images. Did you know Disney owns Hulu? That's their streaming site. They bought it back in 2019, 6 months before Disney Plus launched. They could have just rebranded Hulu into Disney Plus, but they didn't. You now have to pay for 2 different streaming sites just to protect the precious brand integrity of the Disney name. And look, if it were just one company, fine. Whatever. If one company wants to act this way, who cares? But it's not just one company. It's every company. And it's not just that they all want to be the biggest game in town. They all want to be the only game in town. I just don't know what I'm supposed to look forward to anymore. Everything's getting worse all the time. Climate change is only accelerating, yet still the government plays footsie with all the biggest polluters in the name of perpetual profits. They'll all be dead before we reach the point of no return, so what do they care? Half the country is rooting for the housing market to explode, and the other half is rooting for it to collapse. Fascism has gone from secretly on the rise to openly on the rise, and everyone in power is either totally ambivalent or actively supportive. And to make matters worse, educating myself on these issues hasn't done anything to improve my mental outlook. The more obvious the problems, and the more obvious the solutions, the more maddening it becomes to watch everything get worse and worse each and every year. It's been brutal on a personal level too. In the last year alone, there have been job changes, cross-country moves, car troubles, chronic pain conditions, injuries, insurance, insomnia, inflation, all amidst a worldwide pandemic that most of the country has decided is just endemic at this point anyway. I filmed this video while self-isolating from my partner who was sick with COVID.
2 lines, 2 definite lines. There's no mistaking them.
My mind is not in a good place. It hasn't been since I first joined the workforce as a freshly minted college grad way back in 2012 and started this YouTube channel mostly as a coping mechanism. But what's even worse right now is that where movies used to be a source of great comfort for me, now they feel like a source of anxiety. What even is my relationship to film anymore? Number 5. If destroying films ever becomes more profitable than actually making them, studios won't hesitate. Okay, let's go full-on apocalypse. What's the absolute worst-case scenario for film? Well, if capitalism's taught me anything, it's that the goal is never to make superior products. It's to make superior profits, even if that means destroying actual products. We're probably all thinking the same thing. HBO Max. They've been on a rampage lately, deleting hundreds of films and TV episodes from their streaming library, including a $70 million superhero film that was all but in the can, and a Scooby-Doo movie that was so close to being finished that they went ahead and recorded the score simply because they had already paid for the recording time. In any case, the studio decided that pulling these projects would make them more money than actually releasing them, and well, like the pundit said, they don't call it show business for nothing, right? This isn't even the first time Hollywood has been in this situation. Back in the 1930s, studios were faced with having to either archive all their old film prints or destroy them in order to extract the valuable silver contained within. And when it was time to make the decision, they didn't even blink. That's why as many as 90% of all films from the silent era are gone. So long as filmmaking remains a purely capitalist endeavor, profits will always be prioritized over the creation of actual art. Just what a non-capitalist film industry might look like is probably best suited to its own video. But suffice it to say that my own independent film was created without any regard for potential profits by a group of talented volunteers. This YouTube channel is not monetized. I just don't like how monetization would limit my ability to use actual movie clips whenever I need them in order to illustrate my points. Plus, the fact that I'm not monetized means
I can curse all I want. Damn it.
Not that I'm opposed to making money as a rule. Personally, I'd like to make lots of money. That is, after all, how the next film ultimately gets made. But the profits shouldn't go to just shareholders. They should go to the people who do the actual work. Well, would you look at that? Caught myself thinking about a future video. I guess the vision of a film industry that prioritizes the creation of actual art over market share and stock value is enough to give me a little bit of hope. That may not be what Hollywood is right now, but that doesn't mean that the artists who work there can't make good art in spite of it. Because you know what? A few days after my first try, I went back and finished Spider-Man No Way Home. And it did indeed get better. I still don't think it's a masterpiece. In fact, I think it's still hopelessly beholden to the MCU formula, which prioritizes callbacks and cameos over actual catharsis. But where I might have been inclined, even just a few weeks ago, to see it as a promising pitch that ultimately got kneecapped by the inevitable limitations of the Marvel movie-making machine, I could also choose to see it as a film that managed to transcend the studio franchise formula for even just a few glittering moments of genuine drama. There's value in both perspectives.
God, this is so cool. I always wanted brothers.
So maybe it's less that all movies are bad now, and more, I've just been stuck in a rut for 2.5 years. It's not like this is the first decade where new technology and social upheaval have completely upended the movie business. There have been patent wars, format wars, world wars, television, home video, streaming, and through it all, one of the few things that's remained constant is that audiences generally tend to get some version of what they want. And even when I'm at my most cynical, I can't pretend like putting all 3 Peter Parkers into one Spider-Man film wasn't an idea that came from the fans. And while studios are busy arguing with theater chains over who gets what cut of the first dollar gross or whatever, which is an important debate, don't get me wrong, audiences still get to go see movies.
You want to see it again?
Don't get me wrong, I don't want to downplay just how much capitalism sucks, but I like to remind myself that things like in-home streaming, reboots, spin-offs, and limited series are not inherently bad things, so much as things which must be reclaimed for the sake of the art. And besides, you know you've been cultivating some pretty shitty viewing habits ever since the pandemic hit. How often do you watch movies while working out or eating dinner? How many times do you pick up your phone? Oh, I'm just gonna look up the IMDb trivia. That's the oldest trick in the book. You think maybe if you started watching movies without any distractions, you might enjoy them more? Your workouts would probably get better too. You say you've watched 15 films so far this year and only like 3 or 4, and that most of them were relatively big budget studio releases? Isn't that actually pretty normal? How many big budget films usually make it onto your top 10 list each year? Usually 3 or 4, right? So maybe it's less a matter of movies are getting worse and worse and more you haven't been looking for any of the mid-budget stuff that you'd probably enjoy a lot more anyway. I thought we couldn't wait to see Glass Onion, The Banshees of Inisherin, Weird, Black Panther 2. And so what if they turn out bad? Isn't anticipating them half the fun? So how about we just admit it? Great films are still gonna get made, and you're one of the people who's gonna help make them. Which just leaves the matter of my YouTube channel. I'm old enough to know now that I can't just bide my time waiting to break into Hollywood before I finally become a filmmaker. Filmmaking isn't a destination anyway, it's a process. You're either working towards the next project or you're not. Y'all know I don't go in for that rise and grind bullshit, but if I'm gonna consider myself a writer, I do need to occasionally write sometimes. I know it's hard. I'm happy to cut myself some slack. It's hard writing a big budget script knowing how much work it would take to convince someone to finance it. And it's also hard to write a no budget script knowing how much work it would take to self-produce. I probably wouldn't have made Second Service if I knew how hard it was gonna be. But in the end, it isn't up to anyone else to decide whether or not I'm gonna keep making movies. Other people might help decide their budgets, but not whether or not they get to exist. That's my job. Mine alone. I can't keep making YouTube videos if it's going to cost me my filmmaking ambitions. That's the simple truth. I want to keep making films. Telling stories is how I sort myself out. And yeah, making films is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But I guess if it were easy, then everyone would do it. If I can't make films because of this channel, I need to give up the channel. It's as simple as that. Of course, there's a third option. I could do both. Ain't no rules as a YouTuber can't make films, or that a filmmaker can't make YouTube videos for that matter. I've just never had the time and energy to do both at the same time. But maybe there's a way to make it work. Then again, we've all heard me give these little metatextual pep talks to myself before, right? As recently as last summer. But the last time I felt like this, I went and made a movie. I took a 4-month break from making videos after that and wrote nary a single script in all that time. But then maybe the timing just wasn't right. I mean, I did move cross-country. I got a new job, overcame several financial emergencies, illnesses, injuries, and it's not like life is finally calming down or anything. But I just feel better equipped to handle it.
Now I'm older and my problems are deeper, but I'm more equipped to handle them.
The world is still as big a dumpster fire as ever, but in all the years that film has existed, artists have always had to overcome crises in order to continue making art. And if film is really that important to me, this should be no different. It's still just words, though. Words I've already said before on this very channel. So what, if anything, makes this time so different? Well, how about the fact that I finally finished a script? And it's a semi-finalist in this year's Nickel Fellowship. Am I crazy or is this a look?